So climate change is one of, if not the most existential problem facing humanity over the next, many, many years. CO2 levels are the highest they've been ever and are continuing to rise. How can we work together to turn what is once deemed or always been deemed as a problem and turn it into being part of the solution?
So welcome to this week's episode of Leaders on a Mission. I'm your host, Simon Leich. Look, reducing CO2 emissions is crucial to combating climate change. Yet, I know it's one of the toughest challenges we face. So our guest today is really on the front lines of this battle. So we have Greg Constantine, co-founder and CEO of the Air Company, an innovative startup really turning CO2 into valuable products, a number of valuable products actually, and we'll discuss how the Air Company is revolutionizing carbon capture. We'll look at their innovative, cutting-edge AIRMADE technology and the profound impact it can have on our planet and even space exploration. So Greg, I know you're a very busy man, doing lots of things, so appreciate you sparing the time and coming on today.
Thanks, Simon. Appreciate having me.
You know what's interesting, like having a look at your profile, right? And just looking back at where you started life from. I don't think there's many people that start from the corporate world of Diageo and end up in a CEO of a very innovative, technology-heavy kind of business. So I'm intrigued. Tell us, I suppose, just a little bit about that journey that helped prepare you for this current role, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thanks for having me. It's always interesting kind of reflecting and talking about the journey as well. Well, I mean, I'm from Australia, obviously speaking to a fellow Commonwealth, from Australia originally and moved to the US about a decade ago now. I finished my degrees in Australia and moved over to the US and was recruited to a job at Diageo where I spent a couple of years there really learning about, big business and how big business works. It was my first kind of corporate job at the time in my kind of like early to mid 20s and was really trying to find my feet. And I think one of the major learnings while there was one is businesses like that do incredibly well because of the process that they have, because of the way that they drive process, and that's how they are successful in the end. What I found was that, in my early to mid 20s, process is great, but it's slow. And so in order to go out and really, incite change and motivate and try to actually, use technology at the forefront, because I really believe, and we really believe that, when you merge technology with creative thinking, really amazing things can happen. Really thought that I need to go out and actually, start something on my own. So I had kind of really started thinking about that journey. And, serendipitously, I met my co-founder and business partner, Dr. Stafford Sheehan, overseas actually, and we came together and really started to conversate about some of the things that were purposeful to us, some of the things that were meaningful to us, and how we could maybe use our variant skill sets to try to come together to create something that could go out and be purposeful and hopefully be mission driven, and that's led us to found Air Company together, and 6-7 years later we're still here running it and trying to inspire others and do incredible work with it as well.
So just a couple of things on that. I think first of all, when it comes to the journey, right, the sustainability journey, where did that really kind of resonate with you and kind of emanate from you, I should say?
I touched on that piece about Australia. So, you grow up around, Australia's a massive island, right? Massive island, very naturist, very, environmental in a lot of respect. And then you take that contrast of going from that island to New York City, another island, and which is, probably, one of the most, juxtaposed islands when you're thinking about it, right? And so over time, being surrounded by that concrete jungle of New York City and then working at a large organization, seeing how big business works, but also seeing the unfortunate detrimental nature of these big businesses as well, started to really spark that for me. Then meeting my business partner who got his PhD from Yale in the fields that we're working on now, kind of culminated into this kind of like purpose-led, mission-driven. And now what I would say on top of that, on top of all of that is that innovation is at the core of what really helps drive my thinking as well, right? How can you be creative? How can you be innovative as well? And then when you layer that with the layer of we're doing things that are phenomenal for people, we're doing things that are phenomenal for the planet, even though they're really, really difficult. It really inspires you to get up and want to work on the things that you're working on a daily basis. And so that's kind of the driving force and where it's kind of come from.
Yeah, no, great. No, thank you for that. And just the other thing as well, looking at the background, right? Scientifically, I get you've got a co-founder and a partner, but here we're really dealing with such a strong level of scientific kind of rigor in terms of how your business is innovating, right? I mean, just interesting that journey for you as a non-scientific, background. How has that been for you? Tell us a bit about that.
Great question, and not without its challenges for sure, right? And so there's a few things to unpack there. Is one, you really have to believe in your partner and your team as well, right? And you've got to support all the business work that's happening with a business partner, but also an incredible team around us that help support from a technical perspective. Two is you got to get in and learn. You have to get in there and try to learn as best as possible. But the third piece of this is one that we actually really believe is a positive, is having two sides of that, right? Having a really heavy technical side and a business and sales orientated side. And so having that mindset difference allows you to be successful, but allows you to think differently when going into these fields as well, because you have to think differently when you're innovating and trying to be out of the box and trying to take down or kind of work against those traditional industries as well. So there's a few layers there for sure, but not without its challenges. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. So tell us, when we think about the air company, just talk a little bit around the problems you solve and why they're so important to you, as it were.
Climate change and energy independence are the real core areas of focus for our business. When Steph and I set out to start the business, we said climate change is one of, if not the most existential problem facing humanity over the next, many, many years. CO2 levels are the highest they've been ever and are continuing to rise. How can we work together to turn what is once deemed or always been deemed as a problem and turn it into being part of the solution? And, it's kind of, an area that we hang our hats on in some respect, right? How do you take a greenhouse gas and allow us to use it? And how do we rethink about, the use cases for that as well? And, that has been the underpinning, line of our business, and, using innovative thinking and technology and business strategies to go out and commercialize, technologies that we have as well. And so when we first started the business, we said, in order for this business to be successful long-term, in order to get towards these really large industrial markets like, fuels for aviation or rocketry or otherwise, if we look at all the businesses, that have come before us, many of them have tried to scale far too quickly and have gone and burnt through tens of millions, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars trying to get there too fast. So let's take those learnings. Let's look at the learnings of other innovative companies, but whether it be Tesla or otherwise, where we've utilized the low volume, high margin market first to enter into the market, and then as you scale and come down the cost curve, you get into these much larger industries where the cost is razor slim. And so that's the business model that we took and have kind of executed on over the last 5 or 6 years. We created these consumer based products first. We monetized our research and development while scaling getting towards these really large industrial markets. And that's that kind of transitional period that we're at today. Okay, great.
And is that ultimately where the future is for the business? Because, in terms of the markets that you're going after, when you think about, for instance, sustainable aviation fuels and rocketry, for instance, is that how much of a focus are those markets?
They are the major focus for the business for sure. Yeah, it's where you can have the most amount of impact, and it's where you can have and hopefully grow into the largest possible kind of TAMs and from a business perspective.
Yeah, awesome. And what would be awesome? Maybe just talk through a little bit around some of those key milestones you've achieved. I'd love to hear a bit more about the consumer products and how you were able to take the baseline technology and commercialize it, as it were.
Yeah. So the first technology that we really worked on was a CO2 to ethanol technology. And, ethanol goes into, ethanol is a very widely used chemical that goes into an array of industrial products, but it's also a chemical that goes into, or an alcohol that goes into an array of consumer products as well. So in 2019, we put out and launched the world's first consumer beverage product made from carbon dioxide. It was a vodka product. We launched it here in the US in a number of cities around the country. It was featured in a number of Michelin-star restaurants around New York and Florida and California, and was a really great way to, again, monetize our R&D, bring in revenue for a very early stage business, allow us to prove that, hey, if you're able to create a physical product that people can drink that's made from carbon dioxide, it becomes a reality, right? It becomes your MVP, that product that you can get in front of folks and allow them to understand that, okay, what you're doing does work and we can see a future for it. And, during the pandemic, we transitioned and pivoted a little to put out a sanitizer product as well that we donated throughout New York. And we then went on to release a perfume product as well that we sold throughout the country and actually internationally as well. In the UK, we're actually, we're selling in a store called Selfridges in London as well. And so, these products were really great educational tools for us. They allowed our teams to continue to work on technology that would all ladder up to the technologies that we're working on today and monetize our research and development, while we scaled. So, over a 3 or 4 year period, we really worked on those and scaling up our technology to now where we're at today, where we're transitioning the technology to really be focused on, the future of fuel, namely aviation. Aviation has always been deemed and is one of the toughest industries to decarbonize. Aviation industry makes up somewhere between 2 to 3% of global CO2 emissions on a yearly basis, and so fuel being a big part of that. So as we really think about the future of not only commercial aviation, but aviation in both the public and private sector as well, creating a fuel that can be created in a modular and dispersed location that's feedstocks are only carbon dioxide energy and water, we have the ability to really create a substantial impact, and that's the focus.
Awesome. You mentioned earlier about rocketry as well, because it was interesting reading about some of the stuff that you were doing with NASA, and we'll come on to that in a bit. But with aviation, sustainable aviation fuels, just tell me, is it the same fuels that go into rockets as well? Or is that a different kind of blend of different fuel?
There are slight variances. Yeah, there are slight variances, and there are a number of different rocket engines that take on different fuels. But for the aviation industry specifically, the fuel that we create for the aviation industry is exactly the same and has the exact same proponents as a traditional fossil-based fuel. So there's no engine changes that are needing to be required for airplanes, essentially, from the fuel that we create. It's just a cleaner, obviously more sustainable fuel with the highest GHG emissions reduction of any out there.
So I know the sustainable aviation industry, it's an interesting one in terms of there's lots of, government-wide mandates around this now, right? So, companies need to purchase a certain amount of sustainable aviation fuel, right, from a mandate viewpoint. So I see that that's driving the industry. Is that the main kind of driver, would you say, like in terms of what you see out there? Is it?
It's definitely a driver of the industry for sure, right? Legislative changes that are moving commercial airlines to be more sustainable. There are the airlines themselves that are moving to want to be more sustainable because of the customers as well, right? Their customers are asking, how these airlines can be more sustainable. What are the efforts they are making, to meet the 2030 goals, to meet the 2050 goals as well. So there are a number of different factors in that chain, I would say. But legislative changes are definitely one that is helping drive airlines in order to be more sustainable. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, great. And I'd love to dive into a little bit the AIRMADE technology, as it were, and just understand a little bit about how it works. And yeah, it looks really complex. So, just at a high level, as it were.
Yeah. So, if you think about, nature as a whole, right? If we go out and we find ways to mimic nature, right? Nature is one of the best tools that we have around us. And so we really like to think, when we think about innovative technology, how we can go out and mimic nature. And so our technology is similarly based off a principle that, based around nature as well, being artificial photosynthesis.
Yeah.
Butchered it. So we take carbon dioxide. We're agnostic on the source of CO2.
Yeah.
We combine it with hydrogen. Today we create the hydrogen ourselves via a process called electrolysis. And when we combine the CO2 and the hydrogen inside our reactors, we have the ability to make a suite of chemicals and essentially fuels as well. And so, the ethanol product that we had made, came off that same principle as the fuel products that we make come off that same principle. And that is definitely a simplified version of the technology and how we talk about it. But some of the upside to the technology in that sense is that we are not feedstock limited. We're not constrained by our feedstocks, right? CO2 is abundant, whether you're capturing it from the air, whether you're capturing it from the ocean, or whether you're actually taking it from a source of emissions like an ethanol plant, as an example. And for our company and for our technology, the ability to have an abundance of feedstocks is really important in how you scale the technology, but also where you site your technology as well. So you have the ability to site in an array of different locations, as long as you have those feedstocks being carbon dioxide, energy, and water, essentially.
Got it. So were you so many questions about it. So the photosynthesis, what when you say you can mimic it, talk me through that. Is that the hydrogen going in that mimics it, as it were?
Yeah, so when you think about a tree, right? A tree uses energy, and it takes in CO2. It uses the sun's energy. It takes in CO2 and it puts out oxygen. We do the same thing, right? We take in CO2, and the byproduct of the hydrogen creation is exactly that. It's oxygen, and so it's a similar mimicry process as what photosynthesis is as well.
Okay, got it. And when you talk about different feedstocks, is that part of the strategy to be able to exercise lots of different feedstocks as part, rather than just stick with one or the other, as it were?
It is in some respect. Cost plays a major factor, obviously, when creating an end product that you're selling to a customer. So that plays a big role in how we think about the feedstocks. But in terms of the source of carbon dioxide or the source of hydrogen, the technology is flexible in that it has the ability to utilize any source of CO2. Now, the purer the stream of CO2, the more efficient your process will be, ultimately leading to a cheaper cost to produce. But it does not stop you from using a variety of sources of CO2 should you need to.
Got it. Okay. Is it worth just touching upon some of those different sources, some of the pros and cons from either an effective, either from a cost viewpoint or a quality viewpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as an example, direct air capture, which is a source of CO2 that's widely spoken about in the industry today. The source of that CO2 comes at a cost, because the energy that's required in order to capture the amount of CO2 that you need in order to utilize is relatively high. So the cost associated with that is high from an energy perspective, making that source of CO2 today relatively expensive compared to an industrial biogenic source of CO2, such as capturing the emissions off of a traditional corn ethanol plant, which is a much purer stream of CO2, and a much more cost-effective stream of CO2 as well. So there are layers within that that play a role in how you think about where you site your technology, how you think about your the source of your feedstock being carbon dioxide as well, and ultimately are just part of the decision making that any business needs to make, just based on the goals or the strategy of their business or of their customers and what their customers want.
Yeah. Okay. No. Great. Thank you for that. That was fascinating. And look, I'm sure, as you've outlined the process in its simplistic terms, I'm sure there's been some journey over the last 7 years with that. How? Just tell me, in terms of the innovation, right, and in terms of what you're doing, what have been the biggest challenges you've had to face, do you think, with this?
I think timelines are one. You're always, as a traditional non-technical individual, you're always really bullish about, pushing timelines. But what we've learned and what we continue to learn on a daily basis is that hard things take time. technology and science takes time, and you have to always iterate. And so to your point, yeah, the process today is very different to what the process looked like when we first started, and I'm sure it will continue to evolve over the next year, 5 years, 10 years, and however long we continue to work on technology for. So yeah, innovation is all about persistence. It's all about creative thinking and really trying to go out and try to problem solve through creative thinking. And so yeah, there are challenges that you face all along, but timelines are definitely one of them when creating new technologies. And the other, I would say, is ensuring that you are, as you try to achieve commercial scale, always thinking about ways to come down the cost curve. Because when you're selling an end product or you're planning to sell a technology, that has an edge of whether it's a sustainability edge or other types of innovative thinking or edges to them, cost is ultimately most important to achieve scale.
Yeah, awesome. So tell us a little bit about like commercialization from here. Actually, when I think back, when I think about your hopes and dreams of the company, right? Next 5, 10, 15 years, what does that look like for you?
We want to see the technology be used and it be as widespread as possible. That's the reason why we started the business, and it's why we work on the things that we work on, right? If we can have the technological footprint and impact not only here in the United States but all over the world, that's a massive goal for the business, and that would be what we're working towards, right? How can we reduce the amount of CO2 emissions out there and go into industries that are typically hard to abate industries from an emissions perspective, and try to help solve problems. And so that's what we work on. Yeah,
absolutely. And what about in terms of the scale up and the commercial? Take it back a bit. Clearly, when you think about the value chain, you think about partners and you think about the role that your company play. Well, just clarify where you see yourself. Are you actually going to be building these facilities and actually be a wholesale kind of seller of sustainable aviation fuel?
We view ourselves as a technology provider. And so, longer term, we understand that, where our best skill set lies within our business is the ability to create technology and innovate with technology. There are many other folks out there whose strongest suit is to go out and operate plants that integrate technology like this to be the final producer of that end product, whether it's aviation fuel or otherwise. And going out and working with these organizations, collaborating with these organizations, allows us to see the technology be as widespread as soon as possible. And so that is the business goal.
Got it. Okay. No, great. Thank you for outlining. I would have thought partnerships would have been such an important thing with this, right? And probably like across the value chain, I would have thought as well, right? How is that for you in terms of when you think about the industry and the complexity about navigating that?
You can't do anything without partners. We believe that. And collaboration is just so key, not only for an early stage business or a mid stage business, but, I think for any business, you need to be able to collaborate with peers, with competitors in order to actually go out and be successful when working on new technologies like this. So for us, we have partnerships throughout everything we do within the business, everything from, funding partnerships to technology partnerships to commercial partnerships to how we operate and run our business internally. And without those key partnerships along the way, and as we think about how we scale, not only would we not be where we are today, but we won't be able to get to where we want to get to in the future. So they're so integral, we believe, to the success of businesses, not only to help reduce your costs, but to also help you move faster, but also to help you innovate and work on technology as well. So absolutely.
Yeah, no, great. No, thank you for that. And in terms of being able to scale this then, where are we on the journey now, as it were? How far away are we? And give us some viewpoint on what meaningful scale kind of looks like.
Yeah, we see ourselves reaching a really meaningful scale in the next several years. So definitely inside this decade. And for us, meaningful scale is, producing fuel ourselves at a reasonable scale that allows us to not only go through and test, but really to fly aircrafts and to fuel a variety of aircrafts and not only aircrafts, but other vehicles as well that we are doing with some of our partners. So for us, that's meaningful scale. As I said before, a lot of these industries and the industries that we're going into take a lot of time, right? When you're putting steel in the ground, when you're building things, and when you're kind of proving out technology and getting through things like the regulatory process, they take time. And so, you have the ability to actually work on the craft, work on technology, and then ultimately create a massive impact with technology like this.
Yeah, no, awesome. Tell me, I was fascinated reading about your kind of clean energy solution and the deep space food challenge, for Mars. I mean, it looked fantastic. So is that still ongoing, or was that, was that a competition you were kind of involved in? And what's the status of that?
Yeah, our work with NASA is definitely still ongoing. Interestingly enough, NASA was the first government partner and contractor that we actually worked with and have had the longest relationship with. We do a lot of work with a variety of different government agencies, and there are some incredible pros to those because they allow you to really focus on the innovation, not necessarily at first with cost in mind, right? It's really about, can you make this work? And then if you can, we'll help work with you. We'll help fund you a little bit along the way, and then we'll help working on how do we make it work, at scale and in a more cost-effective way. And so, working with government groups like NASA really allow you to do that. It allows teams to think creatively in order to see what problems that you can go out and try to solve, and then once you've proven it, start really working on the commercial viability of it. So, yeah, we do have some ongoing work with NASA that we're working on currently as well.
Awesome, yeah, and. No, it was, and it's like deep space is the food challenge or clean energy for deep space. Does that, is that part of the picture for you as well?
A lot of the work that we do with NASA is still related to fuel. Part of the deep space food challenge that we won, is, we have an innovation team that still continues to work on, innovative, solutions that utilize carbon dioxide, because that is, the core of what we do. And so, the deep space food challenge, where we went out and created, sugars and proteins, for NASA from CO2, fit within our innovation pipeline that our teams are working on. So, yeah, absolutely. And, as we spoke about partners earlier as well, and as we spoke about kind of, technology earlier as well, having credible partners for a startup and for an early stage business really allow, the business to go out and not only prove to people, but show people that when you're working with organizations, whether it's government or whether it's other commercial businesses as well, it allows you to kind of put yourself in a place that allows people to understand not only the work you're doing, but the credibility of the partners you're working with. And who doesn't like working with NASA as well?
Yeah, it must be awesome. Is it as you would imagine it to be?
In a lot of respect, yes. And I think because as we imagined it to be was groups like that allowing and pushing you to be innovative and to think innovatively. And so, yeah, while you're still working with a body within the government, it really allows teams to go out and work on things that are passionate to them. And so that's really important to us at the company.
Yeah, no, awesome. I think one of the challenges, if I think to companies out there at the moment and what funding is like, it's almost like investment dollars going into stuff that can be executed or delivered or brought to market really quickly. And it's a real shame to see so much innovation or longer term innovation having to be cut across the space over the last year or so. And tell me, as a CEO, founder of the business, right, when you think about these long-term commercial goals, is that always a healthy challenge, trying to kind of combine continued innovation with commercialization, as it were?
That's a great question. Yeah, that is a really great question. It is very difficult because in a business at the scale that we're at, you have to be rigorous. You have to be relentlessly focused at normally a singular task, and this, because what we are trying to do and what many others in the space are trying to do is really, really difficult. Many have failed, almost all have failed trying to do it. So the grapple of remaining focused at commercializing large-scale technologies that you can get to the largest, possible potential TAM and really come down the cost curve, while still trying to work on innovative projects as well, is a tricky, thing in any business. Now, what you need to ensure that you do, and what we ensure that we do, is that the innovation work always must ladder up to the commercial work that's happening. So whether it's process learnings, whether it's technological learnings, whether it's team learnings, they have to always ladder up. And if they don't, We have to take hard looks internally and really get together and say, as great and as amazing this opportunity is it right for us now? And does it ladder up to what it is that we are trying to achieve as a business as part of our strategy? And yeah, they're learnings that you go through going from a 2-person business to over a 100-person business, right? It's about being rigorous and really relentless at the pursuit of what your goal is and having hard decisions in a business for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And what is it like in terms of the capital gap now and the challenges, with fundraising? How are you kind of approaching? Well, what's been your journey of that? How's that kind of evolved for you over the last few years, as it were?
For us, everything's been milestone based. We've tethered all of our capital strategy to the next milestones that we are trying to achieve within the business, and proving out those milestones, putting together a rigorous plan to get towards the next milestone, and going out and seeking and sourcing capital through that. Now, we also have revenue as well. We do work with the government that brings in revenue. As I mentioned before, we were putting out consumer-based products that were bringing in revenue as well. So the revenue helps within that kind of trajectory and pathway as well. And the stage that we're at now is really thinking about understanding what the potential costs will be of our next first of a kind plant, essentially commercial plant, because we know as a business, in order to get to that technology provider model that we want to get to, we have to prove out that next level of scale that I mentioned earlier and getting to that scale. So as we think about funding moving forward, it's really how do we go out and actually finance a potential small commercial project like this for our customers that we can use as a stepping stone to get towards really being a large technology provider.
Yeah, and what are the options now then when you think about the marketplace and how you're thinking about financing in terms of, what kind of options do you have out there?
We seek it all. I think, you really think about, looking at both dilutive and non-dilutive sources of capital. We work with the government on some of those, not only from a revenue perspective, but also understanding how you can go out and source, a variety of sources of capital for these plans, both dilutive and non-dilutive as well. And we have a pretty robust strategy that we're going out and executing on over the next 12 to 24 months in order to do so as well. Now, you have to layer on the context of the market and what's happening in the market and what's happening in the industry, and obviously in an election year in the United States as well. And really just be thoughtful about how you're thinking about it and the process that you want to go through it, but also understanding that how the business is capitalized today is really, really important, and making sure that you're giving yourself enough runway from a business perspective and being rigorous about that and financially responsible, so that you have the time and ability to work on the milestones within your business, but also go out and hopefully bring in the sources of capital that are right for any given business.
Yeah, no, great. Thanks for the context. And where do you when you look across the industry, the broader climate tech industry, for an early stage company, where do you think we are on the cycle? Funding and growth.
Look, I think that we're still relatively early in the cycle. And what I mean by that is that, there are a lot of amazing, innovative companies out there that are trying really difficult things. And, to get to that next stage of true commercialization is really, really tough and really difficult. And, there haven't been, too many companies that have gotten there. And so I think that there is, a sense of folks wanting to see more proof before more capital being poured into those industries. Now, you are seeing, as we mentioned before, a lot of legislative changes, not only in the US, but around the world, pushing whether it's airlines or other industries to purchase more sustainably and be more sustainable. But, there is still a layer of proof that is, needed, required, and wanting to be seen from large industry, from innovation and from innovative companies in order to, double down, triple down in industries like this. So I think it's still relatively early. There's a great amount of funding that's been gone in, but there is still some more proof that needs to happen across the sector.
Are there any companies that you look to? It doesn't, in the broader sector that you can shine a light on and think, well, actually, those guys have done it, or it might be in alternative sectors. I'm thinking more climate and probably industrial. Is there anyone?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's companies in the hydrogen space. If you think about companies that are out there producing electrolyzers at commercial scale, I mean, like, an industry that's been around for quite some time, but there is still a lot of innovation happening in that industry. I think if you just broadly look at at the EV sector, even though it has a lot of its own challenges and a lot of questions around, how sustainable it really is, if you just think about how much that sector has grown and evolved over the last decade, 2 decades, there are a lot of companies that you can, or industries that you can look to see where that success has worked and has not worked as well. And I think, regenerative or sustainable fuels sector, there are a lot of companies at the moment that are getting at that stage and getting to that stage and really proving it out. And I think you'll see over the next several years and definitely over the next decade, a lot of success in that sector. There are a lot of amazing companies that are working on similar things to what we're working on. And there are a lot of industries that are pushing for that need and want for it. So you'll see that culmination coming.
Thank you for the context, actually. Just to finish off with a couple of final questions. So how many people in the company at the moment?
We're about 100. Okay.
So what makes a really, effective or good quality air company employee? What is the must-have when you're hiring?
Attitude. For me, it all just comes down to attitude. You can be, the smartest individual, the hardest working individual, but if you've got the wrong attitude and you're coming into an industry that's tough, that innovation is hard to stick with, and you have the wrong attitude going into it, it's going to be really difficult, not just from a company perspective, but for your own perspective to be successful. So, for us and for me, attitude plays just such an integral role to the type of employee or the type of colleague, that we work with and have within the organization as well.
So what are those kind of traits that make a really good attitude then?
Failure is okay. Failure is okay, but persistence is extremely important. And so when, as an example, and a really great thing that, that a lot of scientists and a lot of folks in the R&D space have the ability to do, because, that sector, when you're, coming out of, school or being in school, it's really just about failing and trying again and failing and trying again and failing and trying again, right? And that's what, that's how innovation is spurred, and that's how some of the most beautiful pieces of technology or theories or pieces of work have come out and about over time, right? It's understanding that failure is okay, but you still must persist through that, and that's where the breakthroughs will come. And so that it's a really great quality to be able to have, right? Being smart about your work, not just hard about the work.
No, great. Thank you. Thank you. Do you always find that when you're interviewing people, you can find that quality? It's easy to find that out. Are you always looking for experience in a CV, or are you looking for them to be able to really demonstrate that? Is that something that you generally get a good read on through an interview?
I think it's really, you can get a good read on it during an interview. You definitely want to look at, the background and the traits and all those bits and pieces as well. But it's really depending on the role that you're looking to hire within your business as well, right? Because, you may be looking for someone outside of industry to come in and have a different style of thinking, or you might be looking for someone that just has a very, very specific experience on a very key task that you are looking to try to achieve. So, unfortunately, I think it's variable dependent on the actual role at hand, but there are definitely key traits that you can look for and questions that you can ask that can kind of guide you towards, the answer that you're potentially looking for from a candidate. Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Well, Greg, listen, it's been really inspiring having you come on today, talk through the incredible work you guys have done at the Air Company, transforming CO2 into valuable products, and the innovative strides that you've taken in this kind of carbon capture technology. So really appreciate your time coming on. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us for a really great show this week on Leaders on a Mission. And if you found the conversation useful and valuable, please consider subscribing, rating and reviewing us on your favorite podcast platform. And until next time, keep leading with purpose and passion. See you soon.